Does your business offer a vitamin or a painkiller? Jonny Mirkin and I go into detail around this. A vitamin is optional, and it's something that you choose to take on a daily basis or otherwise, and you don't have to take it. A painkiller, on the other hand, has a pressing need, and you need to get into it right now because it alleviates some pain.
I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be, a painkiller, not a vitamin. Like, this is the dream.
In year 3 of my business, I faced near burnout. Jonny goes deep into sharing what his experience was like, how it nearly killed him, and how that led to inspiration for his new business.
I was in hospital. My body shut down at this point. So my body was definitely taking its toll, and I got pretty sick and ended up actually almost dying. Not many people knew about that at the time.
How would you fare if you had an idea that you'd pitched to investors and that didn't turn out to be the right one? You had to go back again and ask the same question and have the same conversation, and then again and again.
And by this stage, we had exhausted the patience of most of our early investors. Everyone's going to be talking about it. Your friends and your family are going to be whispering, oh, there's Jonny, that failure. He conned all these people out of money.
Jonny goes deep into mental health, what it meant for him, the experiences that he had, and the data that's being present in the world today. You'll find some really fascinating insights from this conversation. Please enjoy. Jonny Mirkin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Great to have you all the way up from Dunedin.
Yes, yeah, long hike up.
Long drive, yeah, it is. Hey, so over the years, your company names have gone, the ones that we've researched and found out, have gone from Disc King to Nomos One to GivenWell. They've gotten progressively more down the kind of ethereal terms of the scale. And so I'm kind of worried that in the future it might be something weirdly philosophical like Zenith Paradigm Solutions or something. Is that what's coming for you?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you're right. You're onto something. As I kind of get further along in the journey, just start to get more and more absolute towards a core mission. But no, that hadn't been intentional. I think as you kind of get along, we've just, we've had some fun with different ideas and names. And it's been a good one.
I talk about this occasionally. My first business that I registered, Potentia, back in 2004, naming space was wide open and a whole lot of different fronts, both for businesses but also for business models and being able to be innovative. Whereas over time, entrepreneurship has gotten easier and easier and easier from a getting started perspective, but it's harder and harder and harder to acquire customers and kind of, grow and win that thing. Share of mind, share of attention, all that sort of stuff is that's probably peak zenith of difficulty at the moment.
Yeah, for us, we've always looked at .com. Like, it's kind of been a bit of a, I don't know, I've become a bit obsessed with trying to get a .com for a name. And if I can't get it, I'm kind of not interested. Yeah. And I know that makes the range very, very small. But I figure, like, if you can get a .com, then your name's probably unique enough that you can actually stand out in the market.
Yes.
As soon as you're having name get at ./io or something with your name, you're starting to get a bit lost in the noise.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I had joshcomrie.com from about 2014, maybe 2012, and it was really just to go, I will use this property at some stage in the future, but I don't want someone else to camp on it. And I owned it for about 3 or 4 years, and I just had a placeholder site up there, and then one year I forgot to renew it. Someone came in and camped on it, and then offered to sell it back to me for $5,000.
Did you buy that?
I had to. Yeah, I had to buy it back for, I think it was $3,000 is what they were not Josh Comrie.
Yeah. Was it the rugby? I think it was World Cup rugby or something. Well, no, I think it was when one of the rugby leagues was expanding and someone recognised, they're going to be 15 teams soon or something. So they bought out all the domains of what it was going to be in a couple of years. Wow. And then they said, well, let's buy this. And then they ultimately held them to ransom because they knew it was coming. Yeah. Even like car brands, you'll see, was it the new Kia with their rebrand? They've got the new logo.
Yes.
And it doesn't look like Kia at a glance if you don't know the name. It looks like XV or something.
Okay.
So someone bought up that domain because it had such a high search rate.
Wow.
And I think Kia's probably since bought it. But
Yeah, my view on that is that it's kind of a bit slightly lecherous behaviour, and you're really kind of taking advantage of someone's lack of ability to move on something as opposed to being an innovative business person. But that's my personal view. So
the patent trolls, I'm sure, would be high-fiving each other out there.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Yeah. Hey, so let's go back to the start, actually, Jonny. So we researched that you'd had Disc King, which was flogging DVDs at university from your bedroom. But you said when we were catching up before the conversation that you'd actually gone all the way back to 5. So what were your early kind of forays into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I kind of always shied away from the word entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Like I never really knew what it was.
Yeah.
Anytime I meet somebody who proclaims they're an entrepreneur, I always cringe a little.
Yeah.
So, well, that's kind of what I have done most of my life. So yeah, I guess even when I was a kid, without really realizing it, I was always very interested in it. So I remember back in the day, Chubba Chups used to sell at the dairy, and I used to walk back and from school each day. And I remember one day the Chubba Chups were going to go from 20 cents to 25 cents. And the dairy told me, hey, next week they're going to 25 cents.
Yep.
I was like, oh, really? So I stashed up my pocket money that I'd had, went to the dairy the next day, and I bought the whole tub with all of them on top for like 20 cents a lollipop. And I remember I set up a shop upstairs in my house, and I sold it to all my neighbours at an inflated price. I think it might have been 30 or 40 cents because of the convenience.
GivenWell, absolutely.
And so that was kind of, I think, pretty early on started doing things like that. And our neighbour, I remember they're throwing out one of their old fridges, and in the door, of course, you got all the magnets. And so I had the idea of, well, what if we cut the magnets out of the fridge, and then we went and got some magazines and cut out some lovely pictures of flowers and ducks and teddy bears. And then we put that on cardboard and we put the magnets on the back, and then we walked around the neighbourhood, me and my neighbour, and then we sold like magnets for fridges with pictures to all old ladies around the neighbourhood.
Amazing. How old were you?
Oh, it must have been 7 or 8.
Okay, cool.
So
they would have bought it just because of the supporting
like
kid kind of thing.
$2 magnet that was clearly going to fall apart.
Yeah.
But it was, I think early on I realised this kind of idea that if you put in the effort and do something, generally people like to support you.
Yeah.
So,
do you have like any enduring lessons from some of those early experiences that you had that you've held true in entrepreneurship over time?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that probably I never thought about it, but like value-based pricing would be one. Like actually understanding if you've got something that people need now, you're walking through the airport, you pay $50 for a bottle of water because you want that bottle of water now. So I think in those cases, understanding actually, yep, you want the Chubba Chup, I've got the Chubba Chup, here it is, but it's going to be at a higher price, and realizing people will pay. And I think another big one that I've kind of consistently found, and I guess thinking back to the magnet thing, which was never a business in my mind, but this idea of people will sympathize and support ahead of the actual business and product sometimes. And so that's been something I've taken through most of my businesses is anytime we've launched or tried to get early customers, even later on, having a bit of a sympathy pitch of like, oh, hey, like I'm just this, lonely old founder. I'm trying to make it, give me a helping hand. Like 9 out of 10 times, at least in New Zealand, my experience, 9 out of 10 times people will give you a hand just because they want to help you, not so much about the product or the business.
Yes.
And that's been pretty consistent all the way through. Even with my last business, we started with just reaching out to people and interviewing them and saying, can you help? Can I just sit with you? Before we had a product. Yeah. And people will, inevitably respond well. So.
It's really interesting. I find that that's really something super present when you're dealing with entrepreneurs, with founders of companies, because they will do the whole recognize the position that you're in and support you if you're a new startup or a new founder in that sort of space. And we've just very recently, as of the filming of this show, had a change in the procurement regulations for government in New Zealand. Mm-hmm. Have you come across this? That anything under $10 million from government, because it's notoriously hard to sell into government. And so there's a lot of folk in there that have the notion of we're better to buy from a safe, trusted brand than put ourselves at risk. Mm-hmm. And so they go and, continue to buy from IBM. One of my favorite stories, which I haven't talked about, is I got into technology in 1999, and INSYS was happening at that stage, which was a $150 million project, a lot of money in tech in those days. And it was a replacement of the Integrated National Crime Information System, INSYS, and a whole bunch of laptops. And IBM made a total mother's pickle of this project. And of course, there was blame on both sides, so it's not just completely IBM. But what the government, the New Zealand, the police force ended up with was, I think, about 600 laptops for $150 million because the project was such a balls up. So IBM was persona non grata for about 15, 20 years. But of course, then times change, relationships change, people change. And then they just did the same thing again a couple of years ago. This was $250 million balls up. Yeah. And so anyway, there's a long history of New Zealand government getting kind of a little bit screwed over by these really large international vendors because people in there are protecting their own position and their role, and they're not taking a risk with local vendors. And it's from, manufacturing of trains through to systems, computer applications to consulting. But they've just brought in that less than $10 million you need to buy from a New Zealand company.
Interesting.
I had my buddy who, I won't say the company that he represents, but it's a very, very large global SaaS company. He's the country lead of that company, and he was grumbling about it.
Yeah, of course he was. Larry Costa leads a new yacht, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and he's got his quarterly targets there, has to meet, and now it's going to be slightly more difficult. Well, boo-hoo, sorry, pal.
It's crazy. So a funny story on Nomos. So we ran that from I was here from like 2012 to exit a couple of years ago. In that whole time, we never got a single New Zealand government client or local council client, despite it running rings around any product locally in terms of lease management, lease accounting. There was nothing better. In Australia, all kinds of government clients.
Wow.
So to the point that they were more commercial, they'd buy, they'd treat you as just a commercial conversation.
Yeah, which we are.
And it's funny, with GivenWell, we've actually signed our first government customer, and we kind of were in disbelief. Like it was one of those things where like, we wouldn't ever expect that to happen just based on experience in the past. So maybe that is part of this new procurement thing coming through.
Yeah, I hope so. And, I welcome that kind of thing. I mean, of course, money's got to flow through New Zealand in some way, shape or form, which will be the defence that these big global companies are saying. The money comes to New Zealand anyway. It doesn't. The profit goes to the P&L out of the States or out of Asia or Europe, whatever it might be. And it doesn't stay domiciled in New Zealand, getting spent in New Zealand. Yeah. So we've wandered around the place. Let's go to Nomos. Yeah. So the backstory that we dug up is that you were practicing as a lawyer, and there was this kind of continued problem that you came across, which stimulated the start journey of Nomos. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I guess I never planned at the time on doing a startup. So because I had practiced law, so I originally was in Dunedin, grew up there, and I was doing my study there, and that's when I did my first proper business disking. And while I was studying law, when I finished that, I practiced as a commercial lawyer for a couple of years, and I just hated it. It was boring. It was slow. Like, knowing how my brain works now, there's a lot of reasons why law wasn't a good fit. But at the time, I thought this is the right thing to do. My dad was a lawyer, and my now wife is a lawyer, and so I spent some time in the firm, and then stumbled across the MBA program at Otago. I don't know, popped up on something, and it was the first time that I'd ever seen there's this world of business that is actually defined as this whole industry that I'd never just navigated in my study in my life. I didn't know you could pursue a business career. I don't know why. And so I ended up doing the MBA, and I did the first year in Otago and then got a scholarship to the States. And so I went off and completed it at Duke. And while I was over there, I just had this moment of, like, it was kind of, it was almost like a Matrix kind of moment. I was in the room doing, I think it was a managerial accounting paper, and our lecturer was talking away, and he brings up this case on the wall, and it's John Deere. And, you're rounding in triple zeros and 6 zeros, and it's, some pretty big numbers. And as we're working through the scenario, we're debating what's going on. He says, now who hears from John Deere? And like 7 people put up their hands, I'm in another lecture in intellectual capital strategy. Oh, who hears IBM? Who hears Microsoft? And you're like, this moment of, oh, wow, like, business is exciting. It's big. There's this whole world out there.
So it was like an epiphanic moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I came back to New Zealand, I was in kind of a dilemma, because part of me, I really thrived and loved strategy. Like, that was my favorite part of what I got exposed to. And so I was thinking, well, should I go apply for jobs with Bain or BCG or Deloitte, or go kind of get into the management consulting world? The finance banks didn't really interest me, but I really enjoyed that strategy world. And then as I was kind of, I guess, working through the options, I realized, well, actually, why don't I start my own? And so because I was still in my law firm at the time, finishing the MBA, I went to the academics at the time, and we meant to do a business project where you consult. And I said, hey, look, what if instead of consulting, I actually did a business plan for a startup? And they're like, oh, no, that's not how it works. And then I kind of reminded them, I'm paying for my degree, my education, and this is what I'm going to do. And then I picked a mentor that I wanted, and they said, oh, sorry, that one's not available. And I said, oh, he's the one who's actually got experience. I'd like to work with him. So again, they agreed. And then so I spent the last 6 months of my MBA just doing a business plan on what became Nomos. And so at the time in my law firm, one of the lawyers, stepping back, one of the problems lawyers had at the time was if you've got clients with commercial leases, commercial properties. So take someone like a Barker's Menswear, right, downstairs. They've got how many, 30, 40, 50 stores around the place. Each one of those has a lease, rent, renewals, reviews, a whole lot of dates, a lot of compliance. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so from a law firm point of view, there was this problem around how do you systemize the reminder of what's coming up? How do you kind of hold all that data together, and how do you actually create the documentation more effectively? And so in the firm, they had already started working on a product, and one of the lawyer's husbands was teaching himself how to code and had built this early version of a product. And so me being totally naive to what is involved in building a software product, I was like, oh, well, why don't I commercialize that? Because you've got the product. Right. So I'll just take your product and I'll sell that. And so we did a deal to buy out the IP and gave them some royalties and some early shareholding. And then I registered Nomos. So Nomos was the Greek god of law. So that's where that original name.
I didn't have that backstory.
So that's the original kind of idea. So this was me as a lawyer going to be selling into lawyers, solving a problem. And took that product, and then I started looking at it and realized, this product doesn't work and it's totally rubbish. Again, in my naivety, I was like, it's built in Oracle, and it uses this thing Apex. I'll get it refactored, rebuilt using that language. Who out there is an Oracle developer? Right. Not a good idea as a startup.
No, you want nimble and agile, not mainframe expensive.
Turns out Oracle's not cheap.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. Right. So I put out an ad, and it turns out only Otago University and I think it was like Ministry of Health at the time or someone used Oracle in Dunedin. So I went to the uni and I said, found a developer there and got her to build some part-time. That didn't work. Then I was like, I need to actually hire people, raised a little bit of money from friends and family. And then that was the beginning of actually building the product and starting the company. But it was a rough start, but we got there in the end. So.
So we met through the fundraising round at 2013, the showcase for the Ice House. At that stage, I was still involved with that group. I spent a couple of years with them before forming Flying Kiwis with Rudy Biblitz and a couple of others. And so let's talk about the friends and family raise to start with. So those are unfamiliar journeys to a lot of people, and I suggest it to people at the outset. By far the easiest capital you'll get from people, this is my experience, is going to be the friends and family. They tend to be unsophisticated investors, so they don't want to go deep into due diligence. They tend to trust in you first and foremost, which brings expectations for that capital as well. And they tend to just kind of go along with the valuation, whatever it is. So we call them the 4 Fs, friends, family, founders, and fools are the first funders. But tell us about your friends and family round and then how you led into doing the next rounds after that.
Yeah, so at the time, you're absolutely right. Like, it's people investing in you. They're there to support you, to give you a shot. It's not really about the business. Like, I think there's kind of the prerequisite that they have to at least understand what you're trying to do, but they kind of trust that you know best. So in my case, that was mum, dad, aunties, clients of my dad, friends of the family. So it was kind of a scattering of 10, 20 grand here, 30. I think the biggest at the time was maybe 100,000. One of the friends, which was pretty decent at that time.
Yeah.
And so that was enough to pull together where ultimately I worked half time as a lawyer in the boardroom of my law firm to kind of make money for myself. And then the other half of my time I worked on Nomos. That's how I kind of juggled everything. So that round was pretty straightforward. I can't remember what we did at the time. I think we just did a straight equity raise. I had no idea what the valuation was. A few hundred grand. Yeah. It wasn't a lot. I think we gave away 10, 15%, 20% of the company at the time. But that enabled us to get some developers, build out what we called version 3 of the product. I believe the company is still building version 5 at the moment. And so that got us to a point where we actually had a product that we could go and present. And so we started pitching to lawyers. And so I went around the country and met with a whole bunch of lawyers. And lawyers were like, this is great. This is the best thing since sliced bread. This is going to be great for my business, for my clients. I'm in. And we started signing up a bunch of lawyers. And that's when I was like, we need to raise capital and grow this thing. And that's when I went and pitched to the angels.
So you're about $500,000 of recurring revenue at that
I don't
stage?
think we were there. No, I think we're still pretty early. Like our revenue model back then would have been, I think, $1 per lease per month or something. So we were pretty low. We were, I don't know, maybe 10 grand a year or something. It was pretty low run rate at the time. Yeah, so we went up and we pitched this idea of, well, look, lawyers are really enjoying this product. They like, they're really happy. They want us to grow. Let's go make it happen. And then what happened is we raised some money. I think we raised about 300,000 at the time. Can't remember the valuation, maybe 3 million. Or
that rings the bell for me. Yeah,
it was around
3 mil, something like that.
And so that was enough to, I think we hired a few more people. We're probably 6 or 7 or something at the time. And yeah, we started selling around New Zealand and then actually started getting some intros into Australia. And then this really weird thing happened, and we had these firms who would sign up. In one case, I still remember to this day, there was a firm in Auckland who paid us $8,000 to sign up.
As in for the
joining fee.
Yep.
So we had an onboarding fee and we had a usage fee, and it was $2,000 a user or something. And I remember they gave us like $8,000 to sign up, and then they ghosted us. We'd like, okay, well, let's get your leases into the system, and they're just totally apathetic. They just didn't care. And I was like, that's really weird. Why would someone pay and sign up but then not use the product? And then we started looking at the other customers like, well, hang on, they're not adding new leases in. So the only way people are actually loading in the leases is if we go in ourselves and we almost consult and drive the system for them. And we had this kind of realization of the lawyer was loving the idea of the product, but the billable hour meant that it was never top of the list. And in a lot of cases, they were in fact actually disassociating the risk and value of having the reminders and events around the leases. Oh, that's more benefit for the customer, for my client, than it is for the firm. And so we end up with this product that people liked, but no one used.
Right.
And it was this kind of inflection point of like, well, what do we do? Do we just keep going the way we're going, or do we pivot? And I now know about product market fit and pivots and how important that is. But at the time, I remember going to the shareholders and the directors at the time and saying, look, we need to pivot. Like, we need to sell into the clients. And there was this no one really got it. And kind of like, oh, no, that's not what you sold us. You're a law firm product for lawyers. You showed us this hockey stick, and now you're wanting to do something different. We don't get it.
Because you would have needed more money, I guess, to, sales and marketing motions and building teams and positioning and that sort of stuff.
Correct. More money, more time. We're now a totally different market. We're no longer a product for lawyers. Now we're a product for what we thought landlords at the time. Now our competitors, we were in a market with no competitor. Now we're in a market with lots of property management software. We've got this weird kind of situation. We've got these legacy lawyer customers. Now we're trying to go into a totally different market.
Very difficult to support.
And it was really tricky. And this was really my first time doing it. Yeah. And when I look back and I look at the board we had, at the time, we had no founder directors involved who could be like, oh, this stuff's normal, pivots are normal, this is what we're doing. It was more of a corporate, almost governance board at a very early stage. And so eventually we did raise some more money. We managed to pivot and we started selling into the landlords. And we started getting a little bit of traction. But what we realized is now our product just didn't have the feature set that a landlord would expect. Because now they're like, well, yeah, leases are just part of the problem. I've got maintenance, I've got repairs, I've got compliance and warrant of fitnesses and outgoings. And it's just a different language. And we had no idea what we're doing. So we realized that where we were getting really good traction was actually not with the landlords and not with the lawyers, it was with the tenants. And this was a moment of insight for us. We had Met Service, we had Barkers, we had Southport, we had DB Breweries, and we had them loving our product, paying monthly revenue, and just raving, whereas everyone else was unhappy.
Right.
But they were only like 4 of our 40 customers at the time.
Yes.
And I remember sitting down and going, well, what is it? What's going on here? And we realized what we had built was the ideal product for property management for non-property customers. So people who weren't sophisticated property managers, it's usually the finance or the CFO or somebody in a business who has a bunch of leases and they just need something simple to store them and tell them what's coming up.
Right.
And that was our third pivot.
Yes.
And by this stage, we had exhausted the patience of most of our early investors.
Approximately how far in? What year would you have been around about now?
We must have been 2014, 2015.
Okay, so about 2 or 3 years into the journey. So still relatively quick. So
Yeah.
it's not like you were 6 years down the path and you'd kind of, burnt, how much capital had you burnt by then? Do you recall?
Oh, it's close to $1 million, I'm guessing.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's probably not so much the time in years, it's the how many hockey sticks and business plans and capital raises.
How much trust you
And it's like, so if we had done one plan, one raise, and it'd taken 3 years, that would be okay.
Yes.
But it was probably more like 4 or 5 mini raises, and we're changing again. And that's when they start going, well, who is this guy? Who's Jonny? Like, why would, like, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's gone here, now here, now here. And yeah, understandably, you burn through a lot of bridges. To this day, I don't talk to most of my early shareholders and most of my early directors. So
it's tough.
It's kind of one of those things where, in hindsight, I realize actually we were doing all the things we needed to do, but we probably should have just fast-tracked some of the testing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that that's why a kind of naive, forgive the term, it's not intended to be derogatory, first-time founder that's just kind of going through that journey for, first time, so it's founder side, or do you think that it's the investor side and they had expectations that were unaligned with what this journey actually typically plays out like? Think about the landscape. I've been doing the angel investing thing for 24 years now. And at the start, it didn't even have a name in New Zealand. It was just investing in companies. And then probably about 2010, it started to get recognized as being this early stage pre-seed and seed, kind of investing. Angel investment as a terminology came up and some groups started to get formed. Before that, you were just a rogue out there doing these things yourself. And my sense from the outside, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that these things took a while to kind of flow down the country. And so Dunedin based, did you have investors that were kind of experienced investors, probably not the friends and family, but the second round? And so, that they had expectations that were just like completely unaligned with the real world of what it's like to do a startup?
Yeah, I think it's always a tricky one. So, I often talk about the different types of investors you can get and what the pros and cons of each model are, right? And so you got, your friends and family, you've got your high net worths, you have your angels, you have your VCs, and right through to PE and buyouts or public, or debt. But with angels, you're not really dealing with the investors because there's an intermediary. And I think you're absolutely right. A lot of that early investor mindset in angel, a lot of that early, I guess, culture and methodology was imported from the States. So a lot of that kind of came in, and I think a lot of it was just consumed as this is how it's done. Right. This is how it's meant to be done. And I think with that came some cultures and ideas and terms and things that you wouldn't see so much today. I still remember early on in some of the terms of when we brought money in from angels was, vetoes on founder. So like for 2 or 3 years, I couldn't make any decision on my own without getting a tick from a shareholder who had probably 15% of the company. And in hindsight, you're like, that's crazy that someone with 15% can essentially determine the outcome of a whole company, right? There are things about founders being able to liquidate shares, there's preferred shares and sales, and angels get extra rights. There's a lot of stuff that just kind of shifts the power dynamic into that camp. Yeah. And I think for a lot of founders, it's often you don't get a choice for any other money. So you kind of just swallow that whole and say, well, that's how it's going to be. Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, that can be leveraged against founders in some cases. Yeah. So I know a lot of founders who've had really good experiences, and I know founders who've had not great experiences. But I think that it's kind of like a perfect storm when you take that and pair it with potentially a first-time founder. Yeah. I'm going to say like me. There are first-time founders who get it, like just straight away. And, I don't know if Mark Zuckerberg did something before Facebook or not, but
he stole it.
He's done pretty well, right, as a first time. So I don't think I'd lump in and say you have to be a multi-time founder to get it. And even now that I'm on 3 or 4, it's like I'm still making mistakes all the time. But I think it's that perfect storm of having that naivety and not quite knowing where to go and having no experience of what a startup looks like, let alone what an even company looks like. Because keep in mind, I'd just gone uni, a couple of years working with my dad as a lawyer, straight into business. Yeah. I hadn't even seen what a corporate environment looked like. So having that naivety, but then having these really grown up, sophisticated, rich people with lots of money, you kind of idolize them and go, well, these guys must know what they're talking about. You know, they're the millionaires. They've got money. They must know.
They know their thing.
And that was my learning.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, when it comes to lawyering, they know how to become a partner in a firm.
Yes.
When it comes to corporate, maybe they're really good at this particular niche or this industry.
Yes.
But when it comes to startups, it's a different skill set. And I think just to together. Yeah.
It's referred to as the halo effect. It's where if we, and this is true of the individual as much as it is from the audience of that individual, if we think that person is really good at field A, they therefore should probably be good at field B. And for example, I had Neil Miller, who's probably New Zealand's top M&A lawyer, come on the show, and he talked about the notion of if he needed surgery, then he would go and find a surgeon to do that surgery. He's a great lawyer, but he doesn't know how to operate on his leg. And the same's true of doing M&A on a business, right? So you've got a great lawyer that knows how to do your wills and trusts, is the term that gets given to your family lawyer. But then if you ask them to do M&A law, they have no idea what they're up to. But they won't tell you that typically. So
absolutely.
That's that halo effect is something to be super, super conscious and aware of.
You see it on almost every startup board in New Zealand, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It's like every pitch deck, just wait. You'll get every pitch deck from a founder, guaranteed. That last page, you're going to have 4 or 5 pitches, and they're going to make sure there's 2 people with some beautiful brand, Warehouse Group or Xero or ANZ or whatever it is, and they are the chief people officer or they're the CFO or they're the and it like kind of you're taking their aura and implying like, hey, they think we're legit. But no one then goes, well, what's their experience in scaling a startup? What's their knowledge with this thing? Some will get it right where actually maybe that logo is related to the industry or, but often, you put all of this effect. I've got a big belief that we pick wrong directors. And that we need to change directors much more quickly than we do as startups. And it's like identifying who and what you need at each stage. Because that halo effect is real. And I'm very, very guilty for it. Every time I had a new chairman or even the board, I would idolize them. Like they, to a fault, and almost outsource a lot of my decision making and instinct to this other person and blur the lines of, professional relationship to almost friendship in most cases. And at times that was amazing and it's what I needed, but at other times that burnt me massively and the company. So I think about it like this, for someone who, and around about a third of this show's audience is entrepreneurs, and I don't mean that in an insulting sense. It's people that have the plan or desire at some stage in the future to get a business started. So there are future entrepreneurs. And so if they haven't done that thing before, starting a startup is the absolute hardest of the hard. So a startup to me is defined as a business that hasn't been done before, or an operating model that hasn't been conceived of before. And so you're endeavoring to inspire customers that your way of doing things or your widget is going to be a thing that they really, really need to invest their hard-earned money on, even though they had no concept of what this problem is that you're trying to solve, let alone that it was one that was worth justifying spending some money on. And so for those folk, I say to them, look, the best thing you can probably do is if you're an accountant, then start an accounting practice and learn what it's like to be a business owner and a founder of a company and all of those lessons that you have to learn along the way there. If that might be a little bit challenging for you or capital doesn't allow you to do it or you can't deal with no income for a period of time, then go and work for an entrepreneur. Go and work for someone who's got a business that they're growing rapidly over the course of the next couple of years and get alongside that person because you'll get the insights and the experience from the lessons that they're learning, hard fought and won along the way, so you can kind of learn through association as opposed to having to bear those costs yourself. And then maybe as your second venture, you can go off and do the startup thing. But the notion of Mark Zuckerberg is such a great example because, he probably is one of maybe 3 or 5 in the world, right? You're talking 1 in 8 billion. Let's call it 4 and 8 billion. Being able to go from, firstly, straight from university, drop out into stealing some technology, where everyone knows that now, to founding this thing that got some traction pretty quickly, but then they were able to commercialize it very quickly, and now it's become this incredible empire, which is, it's an amazing, amazing business that he's been able to build there. But for most folk as graduates, they need to go and cut their teeth somewhere first, go and get some battle scars from somewhere else and from someone else's coin, essentially. Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, like for the people who are I guess, on the fence about doing something. There's also there's degrees of startups, right? So with your definition, I'd say that's more of the ones that are going to have the ability to scale and hyperscale and turn into big companies. Could even be opening a franchise or opening a local coffee shop or a cafe. They're still startups, even if other people have done them. It's if it's something you want to do on your own, there's other ways to do it without having to reinvent, the wheel. But also, one of the things that's really freed me up to do startups, particularly multiple startups now, is I force myself to go through an exercise of what if, what is the worst case? And I didn't do that for most of my journey with Nomos. And so now I go, what if we run out of money, the company fails, and I have to give up, right? And as founders, we don't want to think that way, right? That is existential.
Debilitating, right?
That is the worst, right? Because we tell ourselves, you're going to be it's like Game of Thrones, walking down the stairs, everyone's shame, throwing stuff at you. Honestly, that's what we expect will happen. You think it's on the news, everyone's going to be talking about it, your friends and your family are going to be whispering, oh, there's Jonny, that failure. He conned all these people out of money. Oh, who was he kidding to think he was this grandeur?
How dare he?
Exactly, right? And this projection that goes on as founders, and the staff will never forgive me, and they're going to be out of work, and they're going to be homeless, and you kind of play through all these scenarios of end of life. And for me, for the first, I'm going to say, half to 3/4 of my Nomos journey, that is how I thought and how I lived. And it actually took, personally, I had therapy for years of weekly therapy sessions, and I was able to overcome that. And now I go, okay, let's actually run through what would happen. Take Nomos. So let's say that did fail and we didn't get to an exit. I'd be embarrassed, right? I'd kind of be like, oh, that didn't work. I could get angry. I could resent, shame, all that stuff. They'd all be genuine, legitimate emotions I'd feel. But in terms of one of my friends or my family or, Joe Blogs on the street, how much of their time and attention are they going to be considering me and my failure of a startup over here?
The older you get, the more you realise that they're living in their own world and worried about their own problems.
Exactly, right? Those who matter don't care, and those who care don't matter.
I love that.
So essentially, if you've got someone in your life who actually matters to you, friends, family, spouse, somebody you really respect, do they care realistically?
No, they care about you.
They care about you. Well, they don't care if you fail or succeed or how much money in your account. They don't care. They just love you. So when you kind of realize they don't care, and then you start thinking, well, who are the people who do care? Oh, it's this potential person over here or over here who actually don't matter to me.
And probably doesn't know you that well.
Yeah. I can't remember which rugby player it was, but somebody said, if they're talking about social media and online and hate, and he used to say, if they're not on my phone, if they're not on my contacts list on my phone, I don't care.
I like that.
So this idea of at the end of the day, if I know you, then I'll listen and I care. But if you're not on my phone, it's who are you?
Yeah.
And so when you run that through as a founder and you go, okay, the people who actually matter in my life don't care. They love me. That takes 90% of that dread and weight away. Then you start going, who's left? There's going to be some disgruntled investors. There's going to be disgruntled customers. There's going to be disgruntled staff, disgruntled partners. These are all commercial relationships. Customers. We bought a product from a startup. That's a risk of buying a product from a startup, is that they're not around anymore. Employees. We're working in a startup. Startups aren't certain. Investors, if they are relatively sophisticated, they should know the chances are higher than not that they're going to lose their money in a startup. And you kind of work through and you go, okay, well, actually, I'm not a bad person if this fails. I'm not swindling. And I think that's the biggest learning, is it's about being true with when you're making promises to the people, just not making false promises. And that's the biggest challenge for me. And so I looked at it and said, well, it fails, I go back to law. Yeah, sure, I had my tail between my legs and whatever, but I can be a lawyer. I can earn money. I can make a living. I've got somewhere to go back to. And I think most people, when you start thinking that way, you go, oh yeah, I take a year off work. I give this thing a go. If it doesn't work, I go back to work and get another job.
Yeah.
And when you play it out, it's not it's not that bad. And I think that's been really empowering for me, particularly to take another leap.
Yes.
Now, but it's a scary world, and you're always self-doubting. So.
Yeah, I get that. Hey, legend. Thanks for your ears. I really appreciate you listening to the show. Everything improves through feedback. I'd be really grateful if you could head to my website, joshcomrie.com, just click on the podcast link and fill out a 2-minute survey, which will give me the insights around the things that you're enjoying about the show and where you would like us to go more into the future. It'll take less than 2 minutes. I'd be really grateful. And you'll also receive some free resources should you share your email address with us. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of the show. I was going to ask, and I think you validated it for me, but I would look at it as being the cerebral approach would be the risk management kind of thinking, which is what you'd expect as a board. And you'd go through the qualification assessment and then the likelihood, and then what do we do if kind of situations. That's very cerebral. But I think what you're doing is actually more philosophical, which is the Stoic approach. So the Stoics call it imagining the death, living into the death. Now, to be clear, this is not worrying about something endlessly that may not happen, but it's an intentioned and a focused exercise, which one does, for example, and this will sound terrible, but if you give it a go, then you actually realize that it's not that terrible to do. And it's about detachment from any particular outcome, which is a very philosophical mindset anyway. So what they'll do is they'll go, I wonder and I imagine what it might be like if my partner died. And so I will sit with that for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, and I will experience what that will be like. And it will detach me from that event happening. Now, it's not to say that I won't love that person. It actually has the reverse effect, because you end up being incredibly grateful for that person and appreciating every moment that you have with that person, because you know that one day they will actually die. You may not be there for that. You might go first, but it's a very deeply, philosophical, spiritual kind of approach. So it sounds like you were more the latter of those two. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's 9 out of 10, I guess, challenges for me in my journeys as a founder has been mental, like just mental game, mindset, understanding. I 100% agree. It's kind of role playing. What does this outcome look like? Worst case, how will I feel about that? What will happen? And in most cases, you're right. Like it's freeing. It's not depressing. It actually frees you to be like, oh, that's all right. I don't need to stress about that. I can take that off my energy list. There's always that residual energy, whether you're aware of it or not, that is fearful or thinking about something. Yeah. If I can take that energy that my body's consuming on that thing that is not important and put it to use on something positive, that's got to be a win. So.
Yeah. I think of two metaphors there. One is the whiteboard, where you use a whiteboard marker, which is not a whiteboard marker, or it's not really designed for that particular product. And so when you wipe it off, there's still some residual kind of gunk that sits on there. And so that occupies space on the whiteboard, and you have to clean that whiteboard properly. The other that we use at home, Tina and I, is the notion of the open tab. And so if you've got a browser window open and you've got 10 tabs that are open there, that will affect the performance of the computer, right? Because it's having to run all of those sequences and those processes in the background. So consequently, you're not able to get the optimal out of that machine. Yeah. And we're the same. Yeah. And for some reason, we think that we're different, right?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I want to delve into that, because that's a key part of the conversation. And, you've talked about the burnout thing in the past, and I want to get to that. But I sort of double back to Nomos and where up to in the growth story. Yep. So you were having problems with you're endeavoring to find product market fit, and you found it in this third space, which was the property people. Yep. And so how did you go about then convincing people to come on board for that journey, investing in it, and then kind of, getting the business to the place of growth that you wanted it to be?
Yeah, so we got to the stage we probably had, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10. So we'd picked up a few more. I think we had Genesis Energy and a few others who'd kind of come on board. And we're like, okay, this is solving a real problem. And at this point, we started to now go overseas as well and start talking to others. And what we found was we kind of had a product that was useful, but it wasn't enough that people had to have it. And so we're still on the fence of kind of flogging a software product to people with a lot of cold outreach. And that's hard. Like, cold outreach is brutal.
Sales-led growth is expensive and it's hard.
And it's just soul eating. Like, it's just the worst. You feel like you're convincing people all the time. Like, it's the Basecamp guys in their books talk about, if you need to convince somebody, they're not your customer. Yeah. And I think that's a great idea, but it's also a luxury as a startup. Like, so much of it is sales and convincing people, unfortunately, until you get enough momentum that it starts to come inbound. But yeah, at the time we were doing this, and then one of our investors actually, this is a good thing that came from the angels, is one of the investors mentioned to me in passing, oh, hey, there's this, I heard this thing the other day, there's this new lease accounting thing coming. You should check it out.
Like a regulation?
Yeah,
right.
Just, check it out. And that was pretty much it. And I was like, that's interesting, I'll look into it. So I jumped on Google, and it turned out there's this thing called IFRS 16. Which is the financial service regulations for accounting globally. Everywhere except for US, which is US GAAP. They've got their own way.
Of course.
And what it essentially was going to do about 3 years out was mean every business globally were going to have to take their leases from the profit and loss statement and put them on the balance sheet.
Huh.
Which is a big deal.
Yeah, that's a massive
So if you think of, like, you think of why, you've got all these airlines and retailers and all these people who have actually committed to $100 million over the next 5 years. That's a liability.
Yeah, of course. I hadn't have thought about it that way. Yeah.
But it didn't show.
Mm.
And you'd have to dig through financial statements to work it out. So the whole idea is we're going to bring that onto balance sheet. So you have an asset and a corresponding liability.
Got it.
And that's going to break the world of accounting. It's going to break banking covenants. It's going to break systems and all kinds. And so the idea is, well, spreadsheets aren't going to be able to do this because there's journals and ledgers and all kinds of very complex calculations. So I remember I called up Deloitte, met with one of their partners, and I said, oh, what's this IFRS 16 thing? Is it something we should be thinking about? And he pretty much said, like, this is big. Like, this is coming. It's mandatory. It's going to be here in the next couple of years. And we're like, oh, well, what would we need to do for our product to be able to solve this? And they're like, oh, look, your product's perfect because you've already got the lease, you've already got all the dates, you've got all the events, you've got all the rent, you've actually got 90% of the product. All you need is, here's this graph and here's some numbers. He's like, if you could add that to your product, you can be an IFRS 16 product. I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be, a painkiller, not a vitamin. Like, this is the dream. It's a compliance product. Like, everyone wants a compliance product.
Of course.
It's the holy grail of software startups. So I remember I went back to the board and I said, I want to pivot again, right? And this is pivot number 4?
In less than 4 years.
And you can imagine how that went, right?
Like a cup of cold sit.
Yeah, it went down badly. Let's just say that the investor relationship ended soon after. But I kind of saw the light. I think we've just slowly been iterating here, and then this little bit of luck of like, oh yeah, this is actually going to solidify where we're going. And so I went back to the investors and I said, look, we need more money. Here's an opportunity. I started presenting to some bigger customers. I remember we pitched to Spark at the time and said, hey, this thing is coming. And they were like, what? What do you mean this thing's coming? And now all of a sudden we were the experts. And now that's the position you want to be in, all right? We're the expert coming to you with value. Here's something you may not have known about. And by the way, we're going to solve it. And by the way, we're working with Deloitte. Tick, 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 green light.
Yes.
Next thing, Spark, let's make a deal. Let's do this thing, all right? And I remember at the time, I think we can share commercials on that, but I think our biggest MRR at the time was about $900 a month.
As in per individual customer?
Per customer.
Yeah.
At the time.
Yes.
This is our old product, but with them it was going to be over 20,000.
Yeah, wow, a month.
It was a big jump. And that's because we were bringing a much bigger product, more complexity, more scale. I remember when they signed up, we hired 35 students the next week out of law school to onboard their thousands of leases they had. So it was
from I've got it written down here, something about sexy student program. Is that what that was?
Yeah, that would have. Oh no, we got some from there. I actually went to law school because I was like, who's going to be able to read through all these lease agreements and put them into the system?
Yes.
So I just went down to law school and put a whole lot of flyers around, and I actually convinced some of the lecturers to let me stand up at the front of their lectures and just give a quick, hey, we're a startup. We're this. Does anyone want a job that's not retail or hospitality? 5 hours a week minimum. Come and join us.
Oh, great opportunity.
Yeah. So we've actually got a couple of people who still work at Nomos now from that program. So, so that was what we did. And at that time, the existing investors were just like, this Jonny Mirkin guy, he is a joke. He's the worst. He's this, he's that. We're done. And we had quite a process to actually end up exiting. But what we did was we fortunately had a VC who was really keen in this proposition, and they were coming in afresh. And so they ended up actually buying out some of the early investors and putting a bit of extra money into the business. And that capitalized us to then build out the lease accounting product. By this stage, we had already rebranded to Nomos One, because we're kind of more of a comprehensive product. And now the plan was lease management, lease accounting. And that was going to be the focus, the next chapter.
I remember it happening as an early stage investor. In the background, there was some hullabaloo going on from some shareholders. And clearly to me as a startup founder, this was pivots that were going on. And, we trust the founder to identify the right market to go and pursue to get the right type of sustainable growth that's going to have an economically viable model over time. And so I received these emails and we were getting offered dollar for dollar from like 4 years earlier. And I'm like, this is just the startup journey. Why would I exit now and, kind of take when there's some real momentum that started to happen just in behind the scenes. So I stayed in for the journey. So yeah, I supported.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I think there were only 2 of the group who did.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it was, and at the time, because we had no visibility of who the individual people really were. So our preference was not to have anyone from the group stay. So, at the time,
I stuck around. I wasn't wanted, but who knows?
It turned out well in the end. But at the time, we were kind of, I think we needed new investors. We needed it was a thing. And I think as founders, like one of the big things is we write a lot of checks, and a lot of them we can't cash. And we've got to be really careful that what we promise people or we tell people, we give both sides. Hey, here's what we think we're going to do. Here's what it could look like. But realistically, this could happen. So now, I generally, I won't accept money from friends and family anymore for the fact that you can say things to people and those people will usually not listen to that part. I'm so explicit now that if anyone ever invests in a company I'm involved with, I say, the minute this money hits my account, assume it's gone forever. Yeah. I have to be so honest. It's gone. The minute it's left your account, it's gone. You're never seeing it again. Yeah. I'll do everything within my power to make sure that doesn't happen, but you just have to assume that that's the case.
I don't think they hear you though, right?
No.
Yeah.
But I didn't do that early on. So all my early promises were just the hockey sticks and this is it. So I think it caught a lot of early investors by surprise. Why is this? Why are we pivoting? We've heard this before. And of course, me being first-time founder, I thought I was terrible. And I had a lot of mud thrown at me through that time. And a big part of my therapy. So, because around that time I started therapy. Yeah. And
was this the burnout time? Is this the time for us to talk about?
It was probably one of the first burnouts. I've had a few along the way. Yeah, but
about that.
I was in hospital. My body shut down at this point. Wow. So my body was definitely taking its toll, and I got pretty sick and ended up actually almost dying. Not many people knew about that at the time.
Yeah, wow.
And I remember the next day, the doctors they couldn't work out why. And I was a relatively young, supposedly healthy guy. And they were pretty stern, like, you need to change, something's not right.
I'm just going to pause on this for a second. A good friend of mine, Susie McAlpine, wrote a book called Beyond Burnout. She's in Nelson local. I'm not sure if you come across her or the book, but it's a great book. It's written with a New Zealand lens and context around this thing because it started to trend. I think I did the testimonial for it just pre-COVID, and then it launched, and then COVID happened, and there was a whole lot of overwork and homework and stress with families and that sort of stuff. And I recall some of the symptoms, and I'm just going to share them with you, view that we can surface these things now because they're real, right? So I recall some of the symptoms, and I've had the experience myself of getting right up to the very edge, the precipice of burnout when I was living in Sydney with Ambit in 2019. And so insomnia is a short tell, so struggling to sleep because you've got the monkey mind is always on the go. Then that leads to extreme fatigue and decision fatigue. So it's really, really hard to get clarity on making decisions. Then there was physical symptoms that I had as well, like weird tingling that I had in my body. This is my experience, and I think I recall Susie talking about this as well. Mood swings, erraticness of mood swings and difficulty to focus. That's what I recall. Do you mind sharing anything else that...
100%, all of that. I think the big one for me is I leave the planet. Like I'm just not in the world.
Yeah, wow.
No relationships with anybody. Nobody will see or hear from me.
Like a robot, and
absolutely.
When you see people, but otherwise you just disappear.
Yeah. So I ended up seeing a psychiatrist. So there's all kinds of therapy. There's, from your psychologists who practice, some, I guess, modalities. You've got psychotherapy, there are counsellors. So my wife, one of the times that was particularly hard for us was we had just moved to London to grow Nomos. We'd only been there probably a month, and then I had to rush back. Something happened with the business, and I had to come back very quickly, leave my wife over there. She was pregnant with our first child, and coming back and trying to save the business and my life and marriage and all these kinds of things. And that was when I started therapy. And so I ended up getting connected. My wife pushed me towards psychotherapy and that I should do it. I obviously resisted. I was like, I don't need therapy. Nothing's wrong with me. I know at the time, I had no idea I had an issue, right? And it was after the second or third we agreed, okay, I'll go to one. I'll go to one session. If it's not for me, I'm not just hanging around. And I remember,
what was the session like?
It was really interesting. So it was with a psychotherapist in Dunedin where I live. I walked in and I just sat down. You kind of exchange some niceties and the weather, and then you kind of sit down. I was nervous, but I kind of didn't think a lot of it because I didn't have an issue. And I remember he just sat there and he kind of looked at me and he just this kind of warm smile, very welcoming, disarming. He says, so tell me, why are you here? And it was this moment like, and I joke of it a lot, and I make the joke of like, oh shit, like I should have thought before I walked in, what am I going to say? Like, because at the time I genuinely didn't know why I was there. And what was really surprising for me was not only did I not freeze up and go, I don't know why, but like without even flinching, like there were these 2 or 3 existential threats on my life and my mind that were happening. I just rattled them off. I was like, blah, blah, blah. And it was like this moment of like, whoa, like did that just come out? Like I had no idea. And that turned into 7 years of weekly sessions.
Wow.
On and off, there was bits in between, there was COVID, there was things, but genuine, like most of the time weekly. And
how long did it take him to kind of crack you open, so to speak?
Yeah, well, this is where psychotherapy is really interesting. So as a modality, not to generalize, because there are so many different types of therapy. Like I'm a massive advocate for men's mental health and therapy now. Like I think every guy and woman, but every guy we should try therapy. Yeah,
100% agree.
If it's not a therapist, a friend.
Yeah.
The challenge with the friend stuff, which I find, Simon Sinek was doing a study recently around like friendship and what it means. And he said something that really hit me hard. And in his interviews, he asked people, what is friendship? What is true friendship? And probably not surprising, most people would be like, true friend is someone that you can call up when stuff's not going well in your life. You can pick up a phone and call them. And I was like, yeah, that's right. Like I've got people in my life who, I could call up. And then what Simon said was actually I'd challenge it and say no. True friendship is someone you can call up when things are going well and actually call them up and brag and celebrate. And he's like, most people don't have that. Maybe one. And it's like, if you think about that, like, yeah, like collegiality and mates, it's like, yeah, we're all there. Oh, I'm always here for you. Call them up. Oh, I'm having a hard time. Like, that's great. But like, I've just landed a great capital raise. I've just signed my biggest customer. Hey, my kid's just done his first steps. Do you find yourself picking up your phone and calling your mate and going, oh man, my kid's just had his first day of school?
Your kids are right, but not you personally, because of the whole humble brag thing in New Zealand and tall poppy and,
this is
it brings down.
It's like, oh, I'm bragging, I'm going to be judged and whatever. And it's like, I've reflected on that recently. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I have outside of my wife, really. And now I think my brother, one of my brothers in Aussie, who I have that relationship where I could actually call up and celebrate something. But that's only been very recently. And so I think the friend thing is good and the family thing is good, but I don't think it fills the gap of having somebody truly independent who has no skin in the game. They don't know anyone else in this equation. They are only there for you. And they're not there to advocate for you as you're right or this is what you should do, but they're there to help you work out what's going on for you, like in your mind.
Yeah.
And so
plus they've got a whole bunch of tools that they can help you to unpack that in a way that is productive rather than catastrophizing or going into a whirlpool of kind of doom and gloom or she'll be right, mate. Do you want a beer?
Yeah.
Which is often what the Kiwi male does. Yeah. They think that just by being there with you, that's going to be the balm that you need.
And in some cases, that is what is needed. But I think at least for me on my journey and what I've seen with a lot of others is the trauma that we're experiencing has nothing to do with the trauma that we're experiencing. It's stuff from years ago. It's childhood. It's other experiences. And that's where psychotherapy, this is a very long way to answer the question around the process around psychotherapy. So psychotherapy isn't as much as some of the other modalities about trying to solve what's happening now. It's not about tools and frameworks and suggested conversations and how do you cope. That's interesting. Why do you think that? Oh, tell me where that's coming from. What do you think they're thinking? It's all like provoking, bringing out the internal dialogue and the internal thinking and uncovering like projecting, like teaching me about what projecting means, this idea of having imaginary conversations with people and assuming what they are thinking and saying without being in the conversation.
Yes.
And I was exhausted from projecting. I had no idea. But every decision, every minute of the day, I'm thinking, what is my director thinking? What's my shareholders thinking? What's my staff thinking? What's my wife? What's my dad? What are my friends? And I've got all these conversations and narratives.
It's exhausting.
And they're not real. And 9 out of 10 times, if you actually have the conversation with that person, they say something totally different.
Yeah.
And I realized I was putting so much energy into this false world.
Yes.
And so for me, with psychotherapy, it can take years to get to a point where you get the momentum.
Yes.
But what happens is it's a very slow but continued curve of improvement. And even after psychotherapy finishes, the gains tend to continue for a very long time, if not indefinitely.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the other modalities are more about fixing what's going on now, and then it kind of peaks off, and then you need another intervention, and it picks up, and it's kind of more at different points. Yeah. And so for me, 7 years, like I could have gone longer, but I knew that that was the time. And I actually finished maybe once or twice through that journey as well, and it stopped and started. But it was a long process. But that was unpacking childhood stuff from when I was 2 and 3 and 5 and 10 and 20 and, all the way through. Like I explain to people most of my life until I finished therapy was black and white. And I had no idea. So the whole world was just black and white, and it's now in color. And it's this moment of like, man, you just don't know what life is. And a big part of that for me was I was out of this world. Again, circling back a very long way, but I had been off the planet. And when I finally arrived back in myself as a human, well, actually for the first time, I think, since I was a baby, being back in my body as me, it was this moment of like, oh, I'm here. And all my friends had gone on and done lives and built other relationships. I'm like, oh, I'm here now. And then they're like, oh, where have you been? Like, we haven't heard from you. Every time I call you, you're in an elevator, was the joke. Well, one of my friends always helps me out. You're always getting into an elevator every time I call you. I'll call you back, and you never hear from me for 6 months.
Yeah, wow.
And it's just like being in the world is a very different experience. And so I credit that to that. And that has helped me on the journey of burning out less and spotting it earlier. But
I was in conversation with some folk just last week, and we were talking about the reality of what's really going on in your world versus the imagination of what's going on. And this is someone that was going through a bit of a difficult cycle. So I'm part of a group that we talk about things that are not going well typically, and then we offer up not ideas or suggestions, but rather share some experience based upon our own lives and our own trajectory, which may or may not be relevant to where they're up to. And someone used this model, which I hadn't heard of before, and it was around the stories that we tell ourselves about what other people are thinking about us. And it was there's the there's the assumed truth, which is the negative, and it's the, they're just going to think this about me, or this is how they're going to judge the situation. There's the imagined, which is that I kind of hope that maybe it might go this way. This is kind of a path that could be okay. And then there's the real truth of what's going on. And we tend to go to the assumed, the negative place first, and hopefully if we're doing well, we might be able to get to the slightly more positive one. But the reality is, go and get the actual truth from someone is a much more helpful thing to be able to do.
Massively.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And that's in your you see you got a group where people are doing some of that sharing? Or?
Yeah, Entrepreneurs Organisation. So I've been a long 15-year member of that group, and we have these things called forums, which is a small group of people that meet, and some will do a formal presentation, and it's typically about a thing that's not working well in their lives, either business or family or personal. And about 50% is business. And then we kind of go through the exploration of that thing, and then we share some relevant experience in the hope that will be helpful to them. And we never say you, it's always I.
Yeah.
So you're always reflecting on yourself. So you get the growth, you get the reflection of it, and they may or may not be able to take something away from it. And it was one of my peers in the group that was having an issue, and this was the thing that stuck with me, because I tend to have that, catastrophizing thing if something's going wrong from time to time, and have that imagination. Sharing about the personal thing, I went through a separation and divorce maybe 8-9 years ago. And, these are all still really good mates of mine, but it was interesting to sit in the experience and see who was able to have comfort for a man that was hurting, like in deep pain, and who was like needed to kind of move on from the subject. And it turns out that only really one of my mates can handle that. Like, a grown man who they see, and I've had this feedback from them, they see me as a leader, they see me as a strong person, and to see me like broken down, broken open, and just weeping, and it made most of them, 3 out of the 4, deeply, deeply uncomfortable.
Yep.
And one of them, he just sits there, and he's the one that I go to with the problems now.
Yeah.
If it's not the therapist, and it's not my EO group, it's this man. It's because he can just be there on so many different fronts. It's so hard, right?
But we weren't taught through school to sit with uncomfortable and pain and man up and all this stuff. It was toxic.
100%.
I went to an all boys school, got bullied all the way through. It was horrible. To the point that I've come. One of the biggest things out of therapy for me was trying to understand, who am I? What makes me me? And there's some attributes that actually I've come to embrace. And one of them is intelligence. And I used to fight, I couldn't associate intelligence without feeling that's bragging or arrogance, and I used to hide it. And I used to shut it off to the point at school I would dumb myself down, hide, fail through as many classes as I could. Because if you excelled, you were seen as a loser, you were bullied. And I think the same for that vulnerability. And it's really hard, and I'm glad that there was that one person who did. One of my biggest regrets and shames of my life was, this is before I moved into the world of colour, but one of my wife and I's absolute best friends got diagnosed with cancer a number of years ago when they were in the UK. And it was just one of those moments for us. We just didn't know what to do. And we love this person and her husband. We're friends with them through uni, and it was really hard. But we couldn't bring ourselves to see them. It was just too painful. We just ignored them. We ghosted them, and then she died. And it's we went to the wake and the funeral, and met with her husband, who was still friends with. But this moment of man, we could have spent the last, I think we saw her once between that time.
Diagnosis and when she passed.
And that one time we visited her in London, and we went out and we had a massive night out, got super drunk. And she was in treatment. She wasn't meant to drink. But I remember she drank. And I remember at times she had a stern, to her partner, let me do that, because he was kind of saying no. But for her, having a night out, being able to just let go, that was the only way we could cope, was almost acting like it was normal. And since then, we've barely stayed in touch with that guy who was one of our really good mates, and he's now remarried and kids, and he's thriving in his life. But it's it's one of my biggest regrets and shames of just not being able to be there for them.
Yeah.
And it robbed them of friends, and it robbed us of that friendship and that experience of being able to actually embrace the love and the grievance and all of it, that the grief, that came. So
yeah. Thank you for sharing. So the other day I was talking to a friend. I spent the day with a friend's son. We had a drive day, and I took him out for this drive. Don't have any kids. He's 14 years old, and there was something that was playing over in his mind. And I uttered the phrase to him, which he hadn't heard before. I've done a lot of philosophical and spiritual work over time. And one of the early things you learn is that I am not my thoughts and I am not my feelings. And if I feel bad in this moment, it is just a feeling. And it's okay to feel bad. And what I've learned over time is if there's something that's making me feel bad, I look into that thing and I pause and I reflect upon that thing. And I, on a good day, make friends with that thing. Because if you make friends with something, it's very hard to feel any negativity towards that thing, right? Yeah. And I've certainly learned over time that if there's something which is, going around for me in the moment, that this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Whether it's an amazing, elated feeling of satisfaction from achievement and overcoming something, whether it's a euphoric joy attached to exercise or from something else, from love and joy, whether it's something which is negative, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And that's a phrase that I keep on having over and over in my head. And, I try and help other people with that and, sit there as much as they can let you sit there. It's a really valid thing to discuss. And I'll reference a study, which was a US-based study, but I just know the numbers will be the same in New Zealand, that over the preceding 12 months of the study coming out, which was about 4 or 5 months ago, 55% of founders said they either experienced or rubbed right up against burnout in that prior 12 months. It's more than half of us.
Yeah, it'll be higher than my gut feels will be a lot higher than that.
Especially now with the economic environment we've had to face, particularly in New Zealand, which is probably doing it, as bad as the worst countries in the world from a recessionary standpoint.
Yeah.
What is it, 3,700 liquidations in New Zealand over the last 12 months, the highest, I think, ever in recorded history.
Yeah.
And so I might have that number slightly wrong. Correct me in the comments, please. But a phenomenal amount. And so it's really, really tough out there. So
Massey did a study, I think it was end of last year, it was 67%, or it was 67 or 70% of people who have within the last 3 months prior to that or something had burnt out.
Yeah, wow.
Gallup and Deloitte had 80% and 88%. Like the numbers are very high. And
the thing here is, and we're about to move on and talk about GivenWell because, and this is not a layout for that. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but the point being that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to talk about it. And the best thing that you can possibly do is find others that have been through a similar sort of experience before and just kind of have a corridor with them, sit down and discuss it, right?
Yeah. So it's funny because I identified earlier in the year that I was starting to get into some old patterns, and just very recently, last few weeks on LinkedIn, I started a blog called Lonely Founder.
Did you?
Talking about just a couple of random ramblings about just some of the things that we internalize as founders that just are really tricky. And I called it Lonely Founder because of this lonely journey. We feel like we're on our own. Yeah. And the reality is we're not. But at times it can feel like we are, especially in New Zealand where there's a much smaller population. There's less people doing, cool startup things. And then Dunedin again is smaller again. And so I started at the start of the year just a group of 4 or 5 fellow founder CEs in Dunedin, different stage companies, and just said, hey, should we get together once a month for a lunch? And we're on lunch 7 or 8 now, and just exactly what you're talking about. Just sit down. We don't have any agenda. We have lunch, but we just share stories. How's this going? Oh, this is great. This is bad. I've got this going on. And for me, that's my therapy now.
Yes.
Just being in the presence of others, hearing their stories and being like, oh, that sounds kind of like some of the stuff I've had to deal with.
You're
normalizing it.
Yes, your energy when I'm discussing it as well is one of loving kindness too, which for a lot of Kiwi men may not necessarily have that, front and centre. I suspect it's a consequence of your journey and the things that you've been through and your ability to look into these things. And so I have no doubt that you're kind of the linchpin of that group and set the tone of how those conversations can be productive.
Thank you. I don't know. I think the group, I've got a group of people who are pretty good in that space. So, but thank you. I think it's interesting because if I go back to the start of my therapy, one of the very quick learnings I had was I couldn't identify feelings. Yeah, right. So that was actually one of the things I had was I couldn't name feelings at all.
That's total.
I couldn't identify if something was anger or stress or sadness, joy or sad. I couldn't. I actually just hadn't built those muscles.
Yeah.
And so as you kind of go through a process, I now know what love feels like and what guilt feels like and what shame. And it's when we sold Nomos, I felt hundreds of emotions all at the same time. And I continue to. And people kept coming up to me. And, you go, oh, sweet 8-figure exit. Everyone's happy, celebrated, like, oh, success. And I felt like a fraud. And people would ask me, oh, how do you feel? And what's it like? And you have the answer that you rattle off for the people you don't know. You have the ones that you kind of know, and then the ones you really know. And they're kind of varying answers. And I found myself changing. I was so puzzled. I actually did a spreadsheet. And so for my wife, I said to her, just so you are aware, this is how I'm feeling at the moment. And I had like 10 emotions in a column. And I had like joy, relief, shame, embarrassment, anger. I had a list of all these different emotions. I gave her scores out of 10. And then I gave her a bar graph. And I said, almost. And I sent her an email. And I sent her an email with a bar graph with the table. And I said, just want you to know this is how I'm feeling at the moment. And these numbers are changing every second of the day. So this could be a 10 now and 0 tomorrow. I was like, I had no other way of explaining, like, these are all feelings all at the same time in different amounts.
Yes.
And I think there's this pressure when people talk about feelings. It's almost like singular, like, I should feel joyful, I should feel relief, I should feel shame. I can feel all of those.
Yeah.
All at the same time. They're all valid. But being able to identify that they're happening for me, that's been a big thing that's changed.
I'll share something personal about my year, which has been a really productive and a very satisfying year. And it's been a successful year as well for a few different reasons. And I feel survivor guilt for talking about that. So I'm sitting with this kind of, satisfaction from achievement and from leaning into a range of different things and working bloody hard to get those things, which is a very deeply satisfying thing. But then if I talk to people that are, and I know a lot of people are going through tough times at the moment, I have that guilt about success, and they call it survivor guilt because I've kind of, gotten through these things.
Yeah.
And so that's just a simple conflict. So I totally understand and relate.
But again, those who matter don't care, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But none of those people in your life who actually matter, none of them are sitting there judging you, going, "Oh man, how arrogant that he's, celebrating."
Yeah.
In fact, they should be celebrating you. So
possibly.
Yeah.
Hey, so the exit.
Yeah.
This is an exit show. And so at what stage was it brought up? Because the company was actually transacted 24, I think it was at 23, the transaction.
Yeah, we had a year retention.
Yeah, that's right. I think it was 24 and the last check just had the account not that long
ago. So it was...
How did it start? So what was the origins of the conversation? Was it a formal process that you entered into? Was it an approach by someone? Talk us through that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I'm going to give you a bit of waffle to get to that answer. When we're talking about Mark Zuckerberg before, he is unique because not that he's the founder and he's still the founder. It's because I would say that Facebook has been 100 different companies and he has been the CEO of every single one of them. And I think that's something that people don't necessarily realize is in startups and scale-ups is every year, 2 years, 2 months, 3 weeks, the company is a different company. And as a founder and a CEO, it's like, I was the right person to lead it at a certain stage, but not at another stage and potentially another stage. And for me, at a point in, I can't remember, I'm terrible with dates, but call it 5-6 years ago, I was like, some of the stuff that's going on is I can't put my name on this. This isn't me. I'm not the guy anymore. And so I opted out. I was like, this company needs a grown up now. That's kind of what I thought. Stood back. We brought in a partner from one of the big four. An accountant. Had grown up to come in. He lasted maybe a year, then we had an interim and then we brought in another grown up and they were there for a year or two. No, after me, there's someone for 3 or 4 months. Then after him, someone for about a year or so. And then someone I learned actually the grown ups aren't necessarily the right people to be running the company.
Yeah.
Hindsight's a good thing. By that stage, I think I was only a 15% shareholder or 20%. So who was I? I was a minority. Our family still owned, the biggest slice of the company. But it's so by the time we were exiting, I wasn't CEO anymore. So I had very little influence on what's happening. I'm still on the board, but we now have more of an independent governance board. Yep. The board never needed to vote on anything, so we were quite good. We actually, by this stage, had a really good board. We had a couple of people who had had a lot of experience with startups and scale-ups and tech companies. And so we had a really good board. But for whatever, so we had gone through, the last 2 years while I was CEO, we grew, I think it was 680% year on year or something. It was pretty extreme. So we went from, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of revenue to millions of revenue in the space of probably 18 months. At one point, we're adding 30,000 of MRR every month.
Wow.
So we were in this kind of hyperscale moment. And then I left. And largely it was because I was burnt out, didn't realize. So all the stuff you're talking about, decision fatigue, people couldn't get decisions out of me. I couldn't look after my team, let alone myself. So I couldn't communicate. I just couldn't function, but I didn't know. And at the same time, our product was broken. And what we thought was a 3-week build turned into about a 7-year build. So they only just finished building that IFRS 16 engine to a point that they're happy with, probably 12 months ago, 18 months ago. It took a long time and a lot of pain. And so I exited at that point, joined the board, and then we just tried to we raised some money from our shareholders, said, look, we're going to stop selling in market for a while. We're going to rebuild the product, rebuild the team, and try and kick off again. And for whatever reason, we just didn't get it right. And so that growth went from, this massive hockey stick virtually to nothing. And I think it must have been 10% or 20% a year, if that. And a lot of that was just uplift in existing customer. But what we fortunately had was a 99% retention rate. So even though the product wasn't where it needed to be, we weren't losing customers. We were actually keeping them because it was such a business essential product by that stage. So we'd burnt all these bridges with our partners and customers and all people, but they still needed us. And so we managed to rebuild, operate, kind of get some structure in the company. And we realized we just don't have the right platform to be able to go back into a hyperscale mode ourselves. And we looked at selling. And realistically, it probably took 2 or 3 attempts over 3-4 years to actually be able to sell. We went to market once, we did a bit of a test, realised, no, we're a bit early, always here, and then we did a bit of changes, went back to market again, had a bit, we could do it. And then eventually we got to a point where we're now profitable, we're growing, albeit 20% a year or whatever it was. We've cracked that magic ARR number where we can get an 8-figure exit now. And we're like, okay, let's do it. And we interviewed a bunch of investment bank types.
Local or international?
Both. We ended up picking an Australian firm. It was actually like a 2-man band who came recommended from one of our directors from another transaction. Mm-hmm. And then they prepared everything, pulled it together, and then they shopped it out to 100 companies. They pretty much just did cold outreach, gave it a name. I think we were Project Hedwig or something. And then interested parties came back with, we're interested in getting prospectus. And then they pulled that together and then they circulated that. And then from that, we got non-binding indicative offers. That went down to a handful. And then from that, went into DD with a few. And then that eventually ended up with the one who was a US fund that we ended up buying us. So we're the first acquisition outside of the States, wow. I believe, for them. Mm-hmm. We're like their 7th or 8th purchase. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of like a PE, but what they do is they buy and hold forever.
Right.
And for me, that was the ultimate dream as a founder, because so many companies get bought out and just stripped for parts. And we had offers from companies who wanted to strip us for parts. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at it going, well, yeah, we could get some money, but the team's going to die, the company's going to die, everything's gone. Mm-hmm. Like for my personal selfish legacy, that didn't sit right. Mm-hmm. And so when these guys were like, well, we buy, we hold, we never sell, that's our model. And they leverage their portfolio to just grow revenue. It's perfect.
So. They're essentially bankable, right? A SaaS business, especially if you've maintained a growth for a period of time. Yeah. And if you've got a decent profit-making machine, you can do the mechanics and kind of project out 3, 4, 5 years into the future. Yeah. You've probably paid for that asset in 3 to 5 years, maybe a little bit longer than that, provided you can achieve the growth and you can achieve some back office efficiencies, so strip out a bit of cost. Yeah. And then that just turns into a profit-making machine. Yeah. I had AJ Burtonshaw from Serato come on the show maybe 3 months ago, and he'd sold to Andrew Wilkinson's firm Tiny, which is exactly their model. So they take like a 50-60%, they didn't buy the asset in totality, and then they leave the founder or the majority shareholder with some skin in the game and help them meet both of their vested interests in making that thing, continue to succeed over time.
It's a really good model because you've got all these perverse incentives that go on, from VC to PE to any acquisition where there's, the short term, what are you trying to achieve, and long term, and usually that means stripping out a lot of the core of the business, cutting a lot of innovation, and kind of just rolling it into something else, or just bundling a few together and then packaging it up. And I was really keen for that not to happen. So when we eventually did the deal with them, I was like super excited because I was like, this is awesome. But at the same time, after 3 or 4 years on the board, not being able to influence the outcomes and kind of felt like fumbling, this opportunity we had, I knew deep down, like this should have been a 9-figure plus exit. Had we done things, what I now know what we could have done differently. And so that's the bitter piece. So it's kind of like, it was great, but it was also, a lot of missed opportunity, I think.
So I've got to ask the question, if there was, we make thousands of tiny decisions and a number of big strategic decisions on an annual basis. And so I don't want to relitigate any of those things, but if there was 2 or 3 things that you could have changed along the journey that might have seen that 9-figure outcome that you were talking about, what would those 2 or 3 things be?
They are the values that we have now at GivenWell. There's 5 of them.
Go on.
So putting me on the spot to remember them.
That's 5's hard.
First one is don't settle.
Yep.
So pretty much the values are all informed on the things we didn't do, right? So it's the reverse of what we should have done. So don't settle is about just not accepting things the way they are because it's easy. Like only hire the best people. Like go through a recruitment process.
Don't hire if you don't.
Don't pick the top 3 and just pick the person. Yeah. If the person's not there who can actually do it, don't hire them and just carry on.
Yeah.
So don't settle in terms of product, in terms of people, in terms of board expectations. The second one's measure everything. Yeah. So as founders, you make a lot of decisions around gut instinct and feel, and I think the best founders do that, and I still to this day do a lot of instinct and gut feel decisions. But you need data, particularly when you start to scale. Like at one point, we're over 100 people at Nomos, and it's like now you need consensus and buy-ins and meetings and teams, and it's usually the loudest person in the room will win. And so actually surfacing data, well, what is our consumer, what's the member usage patterns looking like? What's the industry research showing? Pulling it together and then making informed decisions. So we, like a lot of startups, obsess on the vanity metrics. You have the different ones, but what about actually daily usage? What about churn? What about there's a bunch of them. Another one's look up. So look up is all about, particularly in New Zealand, we fall in love with being innovative and solving something in a novel way. And what I found is our team, particularly in product, we come across a problem and be like, oh, I'm going to create a really clever way. Like I remember having a conversation with one of the team recently, a couple of years ago, and he's telling me how they're going to build this whole new calendar integration feature, and it's going to do this and that, and it's going to... I was like, what are you doing? Like, just grab the Calendly API, put it in the product. Like, well, he's like, oh, is this going to be better? And I'm like, man, but there's so many occasions where we just needed to stop and look up and just go, what's out there? Like, oh, there's products, there's services, there's consultants, there's, methodologies. Just grab what's out there and put it in. If it's not core, go find something else. Another one is existing is greater than you. So what that is about is this idea that there's this kind of vicious, it's kind of almost the reverse of like the death spiral. It's like to survive as a founder, you have to be constantly chasing the next customer, the next deal, the next funding, the next whatever. And it's usually at the cost of your current. So you so you go, okay, well, we've got our customers, we're going to bring on Spark. That's going to whatever to our revenue. But we just need to sell a little bit of our soul, right? Because now our product roadmap, we're going to scrap that. Even though 80% of that is debt and bugs, we're going to just ignore that for a little bit longer because we have to build this thing. That'll get Spark across. Spark come in, then A&P, and then whoever, and by the time we sold, we're in 15 countries, right? So you can imagine all of the, now we need this, now we need this. And by the end of it, the product is just...
It's a Frankenstein.
It's all over the place. And so what we have kind of embraced now is this idea of existing is greater than new. If we can prioritize the existing customer experience ahead of anything new, that will actually, drive better success because new will be attracted to the experience of the existing.
Yeah.
So what do we got? And then there's one more. It'll come to me at some point. But those are a lot of the really big takeaways that I've kind of embodied. And I think another one, which isn't in our values, is actually understanding where I'm good. And I came to realize after successive failed CEOs and strategies, like, oh, actually, I was all right. And I was good at these things, but I was really bad at some other stuff. And so I often talk to people about the difference of leadership, management, and coaching, and that a leader kind of, in my opinion, tends to be better in one. And so I'm very much the leader mindset, like strategy, lead from the front, ideas, product, excitement, sales, like that's my world. But give me KPIs, accountability, managing, hiring, firing, compliance, like I'm terrible at that. And even coaching, like I'm so caught up in leading that I find it really hard to actually coach and bring people along for the ride, like because my default is this. So I work a lot on that now. But that's probably the biggest, for me, reflection. It's identifying where I'm strong and weak and then trying to bring people around who are better in those other areas.
Yeah, I love that. I love that model, actually. I often think about the difference between leader versus manager, but, coaching can be applied across either of those, but separating out is actually a really helpful thing to do. So there's a model which is that for a business to succeed, it's really helpful if you have two different character types. One is the visionary, which is often the leader. So they're the person that sees the opportunity, can rally the troops around it, charge, towards whatever that thing might be. And then there's the implementer, which is the executor. And they make sure that
Jobs and Wozniak.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Good example. Everything's there and in place and is working, and the coffee's arrived on time and all the other things that are important to get a business running.
Totally. And I think you see that in companies, particularly where you've got multiple founders. And it's really interesting because I'm keen on your thoughts on it as an investor, because there are, I guess all investors have different, thoughts around companies, but some are dogmatic. We will only invest in sole founder companies, and some are to the opposite. We will only invest in multi-founder companies.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of my reflection has been actually maybe because it is so hard on your own, realizing, maybe I should bring in co-founders. And every time I go down that exercise and I work through, I'm like, that would be the worst thing in the world. Like they would hate me. I would resent them. I don't think we get the outcomes. And there's a risk of like almost narcissism that comes with that, of like, is it because I feel like I just know best? And there's this kind of reflection of, maybe I'm just super narcissistic and whatever. But actually being comfortable with, what, in my situation, I've come to realize I'm a self-founder. Like that's the best outcomes will come from that. And getting the skill sets, bringing them in as employees where I need it. Whereas others actually having the co-founder relationship saying, okay, well, I'm going to be the product one. I'm going to be the sales one. Can work really well. Like, where do you see, like, how do you view that world?
Great question. So there's a few things, and this is at the probably surface. No, it's actually at the core. And there's a bunch of other things that are in addition to these three that I'll talk about. But you mentioned it there. So ideally, a co-founding team is product is one, sales is another, and engineering is the third. So you've got the ability to build the team around those three people, functional expertise, and they understand each of those spaces intimately. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they are values aligned in the values that count with me and the other investors that are coming into the business. And so you can have some, you don't have to have all 4 or 5 of your values align exactly with those people, but you don't have too many contrary values, for example. And that's quite a difficult thing to understand. The third, and perhaps the most important one, is that there is coachability and openness from the founders. And so, in other words, they know that they should ask the question when they're coming up to a difficult decision, and also have the intelligence to be able to reason, is that the right answer for this business at this time? But I was on a call with someone just the other week, and I had this barrage of information thrown at me, and then I asked a couple of questions, and they refuted those questions, and I just asked questions to see how open are they to questions. And then I talked about some of the challenges around coachability, and their answer was that they were the most coachable person on the planet. And so therefore the self-awareness in that case was very, very, very low. Yeah. Right. And so I'm like, this is a complete hard no from me because of all these reasons, right? Yeah. So those are probably three of the most important things that I look for, but there's a whole lot of other nuances that sit in behind it as well.
Yeah. I think you nailed it. The coachability is that line between knowing when to take it on and not. Yeah. Because that's I think the biggest thing is almost a side, either you're not coachable and you just kind of ignore everyone, or you are coachable, but you can be super malleable to others and you almost become a puppet. But it's actually that middle ground of being able to actively listen, hear, understand, and evaluate.
Yes.
And then agree or disagree. Yeah. But with conviction and kind of justification for why.
Yeah. Make a decision.
Yeah.
And then agree to commit to that decision.
Yeah.
So you can disagree, but commit is a term that I love in and around investor and director circles. And so what that means in practicality and reality is if you've got a management team, I had this conversation with a group that I work with just last week, and there was a clear voice of separation. And so I went through the process of educating what this looks like. And I said, we can disagree, but commit. So if you're out of the four on board, we're not going to change the decision because one person's on a board. We're going to record that for the minute's sakes. This is the hypothesis. This is why this decision was made. This was the separate voice. Now I said, no, I spoke directly to the person who had the contrary opinion. It wasn't wrong. It was a contrary opinion. I said, now what committing means is that you go out to the office and you support this decision. So out amongst the troops, you've got to be seen to be in support because you cannot second guess it because otherwise you're sabotaging that decision. Totally. And so your ego wants to be right and to be valid. And so you'll do your bit to ensure that it won't get across the line and succeed. And so then you can come back to the management meeting and say, see, look, guys, I was right. That's not what committing means. Right. So in this around this table, we can have the conversation, but out there, we're supporting it.
And one of the biggest red flags for somebody who's toxic, who needs to leave the organization, is the person who agrees at the table and then goes away and does the opposite.
100%.
And it's like, that person has to go. Like there's just no way around it. Excellent. So that happens, they need to go.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Because that, like, people think of toxicity, like we've had toxic people in all companies I've been involved with at some point, but it's like people usually think of the bully, right. Or there's some kind of something, that's the obvious stuff, but actually like
passive aggressive one.
People who undermine.
Yes.
And there's like, I've noticed there's this, I don't know what it is, whether it's in all companies or not, but there seems to be this kind of idea that people can build rapport with each other by kind of undermining others, or like it's kind of you build trust by bagging on someone else. And it just happens everywhere. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm in the inner circle because I'm trusted because here we are bagging on this person or this strategy or this. But then you just take a minute, you go, oh, hang on, well, if they're so ready to bag on this person to me now, they're probably having the same conversation with this other person over here about me.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Really hard. So,
in this very office in which we sit today, 12 years ago when I was still running the company that was based here and owning that business, I brought into the office one day and a young, she was the receptionist of the company back in the days when you had receptionists. I walked in and I said, hello, I can't remember her name, and she burst into tears, and then someone ran out of the office and followed her. And I got the my ops manager aside and I said, what's going on here? And she said, this has been going on for a few days. She's been infecting others with her drama and things. I terminated her immediately. She was in her first 3-month period, and so I had the ability to do that. But I'm like, this is toxic. This has never gone on in the office before. This running around in tears, blaming other people for what's going on in their life, just had to go. Conscious of time.
Sure.
Quick elevator pitch for GivenWell.
Well, I won't do an elevator pitch, but I guess it's where the journey took me, right? So I had this huge experience with burnout and mental health and all these things. And when I did exit Nomos, I promised my wife no startups for 2 years. And I don't know if I got 2 years or not, but so I did all the things you do. So I went to the university and taught on the Master's Entrepreneurship program. I joined a bunch of boards. I, did some consulting, and I had like 20 different things on the go. I was bored out of my mind, absolutely bored. Yeah. So I was like, I want to do another thing. And so I was working away on a project behind the scenes, like an FMCG product, but the unit economics were never going to work. And it was, and I just kept coming back to this kind of my experience. And I started going, well, like, I'm not alone. And I looked at the research and, depression, anxiety, suicide, burnout, you name it. Any negative outcome in terms of well-being, plotted on a graph over time, and they're all trending negatively.
Totally.
And so being a kind of founder, I was like, well, why? It was driving me mad. And I was like, why? I was like, what are we doing? And I had this idea for GivenWell for a long time, but I'd never really kind of gone into much more about it. And so I just spent 6 months. I raised a small amount of money from some shareholders from my last one and said, look, I just want to spend some time researching. Yeah. And so I just got on LinkedIn and spammed every chief people officer or HR manager or CEO I could and said, hey, would you meet me for a coffee? I just want to learn. I connected with the head of wellbeing at Air New Zealand and Te Whare and Deloitte and you name it, and Spark, and it was insane. And I just had these conversations over and over, and I said, what do you do for wellbeing? What works? What doesn't work? What are the issues? Every conversation went exactly the same. Every single one. We do EAP, we do health insurance, we have a fruit bowl, whatever. How's it going? Oh, yeah, some people like it. Okay, well, what's the utilization? Oh, about 5%. Okay, so what you're saying is 95% of your teams don't actually access the wellbeing support that we're offering.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Great. Why? Oh, well, most of it's reactive. Okay. Yeah, well, health insurance kicks in when you're sick. So does EAP. Most of the other things, even the way we do sick leave, mental health leave, it's when you're already unwell. Okay, well, what are you doing proactively? Oh, yeah, we pay for a gym membership for people, or we bring in a speaker, or we do yoga, or we have a wellbeing day. Oh, cool. How do people like that? Oh, well, not everyone really likes the gym, but the people who do love it and they come in, or the people who like massage. And you just realize these organizations just been making all these decisions, broad brush, across a team of 10, 100, 1,000, saying, oh, this is what wellbeing looks like for a team. And the result is no one engages and no one gets any impact. And so our kind of idea was, what if you just took the whole idea of team wellbeing and you flipped it around and said, let's empower the team to care for themselves. Like, let's get rid of all of the stuff and here's what you do. Just give them a budget. Right. Let them do their own thing.
Yeah.
And so what we did with GivenWell is we built a platform. So it's another software startup. And then what we did is we went out and we found what's now over 700 leading wellbeing providers around New Zealand, from the Les Mills and gyms, their 45s, to massage, perimenopausal coaches, to therapy, and you name it. And then organisations just give their team a wellbeing allowance, and then the team spend it on whatever they want confidentially.
Oh, right.
And so we've had organisations now with teams in New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada starting to use it. And unlike 5% utilisation, we've seen our first 3 cohorts, so people have 12 months to spend their allowances, and we launched August last year. Month 1, 99% utilisation of tokens. Month 2, 99%. Month 3, 99%.
That's phenomenal.
So within that, we then surveyed the businesses and said, well, is this actually making impact? We saw twice as many staff reporting they have great wellbeing. We saw a 30-something% increase in staff who are now fully engaged in their work. We saw, I think it was 88% increase in staff who now have great support, access to support. It's like all these metrics actually moving.
Yeah.
And we hear stories every day. Like someone's just got into golf or hiking. Somebody, could be going to a mole map. We heard of a story, someone found a precancerous mole on a mole map because we've partnered with Mole Map as one of our providers. And it's just been insane getting that response. So we're just early stage and starting, but it's been really exciting to do something where it's not lease accounting selling to CFOs to make a business a bit more efficient. Like this is actually moving the needle on people's lives.
Yeah.
Wellbeing and giving people access to support that they just wouldn't have.
I love it.
So
feels like a culmination of your life's work
in
a lot of ways as well, the journey that you've been on personally, what it was like to be a founder and the things you've observed in others around you. So Jonny, what an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your candor and your openness around so many different things.
Yeah, likewise.
Jonny Mirkin, Mirkin. You can look him up on LinkedIn. GivenWell is the name on the T-shirt.
Yeah,
show us your T-shirt. Yep, there we go. So really grateful for you spending the time with us today, and I wish you the best of luck in your journey from here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Awesome to chat.
Thanks, brother. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Your ears are really important to me. If you haven't already, why not check out joshcomrie.com. There's a bunch of free resources on there, a downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, 2 commas. a diagnostic to help you understand where your business may be at in relation to your exit journey. And why not feel free to drop me an email with any feedback that you could have. The only way I and any of us can improve is through feedback. Thanks again for listening.